responsibility. You know you're going to be doing this event. Some event, this 200 players are going to show up somewhere. Somebody's contacted you, store owner, TL. Before the event even happens, what are some of the things that you think you might want to find out about, or ask about, or that you should know?
Is the TO organizing the staff, or are you?
There's a good one. Is the TO organizing the staff, or do you need to round up some judges? Sean?
I was just going to ask, who am I going to be working with? What other staff?
You're going to be working with, okay?
Space issues?
Space issues. Where is this going to be held? Is it in the usual store? Do they have a large play area? Is it?
How many players are expected?
How many players are expected?
What's our contingency plan for when more than that shows up?
Now there's the answer from somebody who's kind of done this before. For your very first event, you might not want to jump right into that, but that's a good thing to keep in the back of your mind. We'll talk about that later when I get towards the end of this.
Facilities in the area like food, water, etc.
Okay.
Will he be bringing the necessary, or supplying the necessary equipment, or do I need to bring a printer, laptop?
Now that's a very good one. Tournament supplies. I was joking about some people this earlier, throwing 200 people and a couple of judges into a room. Will a tournament happen? There's a bunch of supplies that go into a tournament. If it's competitive, you're going to be using deck lists. Deck lists, where do those come from? Somebody's got to bring deck lists. Computer, if you're going to be doing scorekeeping. What about a scorekeeper? Are you expected to do the scorekeeper? Is the tournament organizer? Has he got one lined up? Or are you going to need to find somebody? Pens. Paper for the printer. Tape. Yeah. See, this is how you brainstorm these kinds of things. Product or prizes? Is this going to be a sealed event, or are you going to need stuff? Presumably, the store owner or tournament organizer is relatively together and can provide some of these. But are there going to be prizes? Where are those coming from? And also, I think a really important thing when you're preparing is to talk with the tournament organizer and find out, and this, Alan just talked about, what are his expectations for this event? What is he expecting you to do? As if it's, now it's one thing if it's Alan and you've been working with Alan all along, you might have a good grasp of that already. But if it's a store owner that you are not that familiar with, who doesn't know you might be operating slightly differently. You can't read each other's minds. You've got to find out the expectations. Any other things that anyone can think of that you might want to know?
Times. What time's the place open? What time will start? What time's registration start? What time's the tournament supposed to start? Do I need to be there early? And how much?
That's a really good point. Generally speaking, as the head judge, you are going to need to be there early. Because even when you get to an event, there are things that you're going to have to do once you get there. You'll probably want to make sure that you're there before your judges who are working with you show up, so that you get your head start of looking over the room. How big is it? What is it? Triangular shape. How are we going to fit tables and chairs in here? How are they set up? So that when your judges come in and they're looking for something to do, would you rather be able to just tell them, okay, here's our plan for number of tables, go, or would you be like, what do you guys think? Either way works, but it's really good to have a plan. And like how far before the event should you be doing this? Roughly. Yeah, a week or two. It's definitely more than like a couple nights ahead of time. Maybe I should find out about this stuff. But what are some things that you need to do or think about before you actually get the whole thing going? Eat breakfast.
Have some food.
Yep, food is definitely, you want to go into this well-fed. A well-fed judge is an alert judge.
Organize the area that you're going to be working in so that all of your judges know where anything they need is, and plan so that you know where everything you need is?
That is really good. You're going into an area which you may not be familiar with. Figure out where is all these supplies that you asked for. Where are they? Are they here?
Introduce yourself to your staff if they're there yet, and you want to find out who they are a little better than
That's a really good. Introduce yourself to your staff and get to know them a little bit. If you guys show up before the players are starting to trickle in for registration, you have a little bit of quiet before you've got to, kick things off and get them going. To get to know them, their experience, so you have a sense of, who is it that is your staff? Is it a couple other level 1s? Is it a couple level 0s? Has somebody thrown a ringer like me on your staff, and how are you going to deal with me? Teams are used at large events, especially GPs. And it's just a logistical thing for managing. A GP staff is probably going to be even bigger than the number of people that we have sitting here in this room. That's a lot for one person as a head judge to be wrangling all day. That's why we divide them into teams and have team leaders, so that it's a lot more efficient for me as a head judge to communicate to the team leader who communicates to the team. And the bigger the event, the more you have to delegate. That's something too, when you're head judge, this is just a very kind of short thing. When you're head judge of something like this and you have some people working with you, don't do everything yourself. You can do that at smaller events. 20, 30, 40, 50 people, if you have to, you can do everything. When you have 200 people and you have a couple judges working with you, you should be delegating some things to them and not doing everything yourself. If you were at a 200-person event and you had a head judge who was running around manically passing out the result slips and grabbing a couple decks to deck check, and you're there on staff, how do you feel if that's what that head judge is doing?
Ignored, confused.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the whole So when you get there and see the room, you want to talk to the other judges, maybe have like a little meeting with them for your plan for the day. You've already talked to the tournament organizer to get some expectations. Now communicate those to these other judges who are working with you, so you're all kind of on the same page. Not everybody works in the same kind of events. Everybody's player base is a little different. When you're working with other judges, you have to realize this. And sometimes you've got to make decisions even on little things. Are you going to give game losses at 0 and 10 or 3 and 10 minutes? If you don't decide this, you can run into the situation where you're thinking 0 and 10, and Stefan's thinking 3 and 10, and Pete's thinking 0 and 10. And so some people are getting game losses and some people aren't. It's funny, the little details. A lot of these have come up just from experience with doing this a lot of times, that you take some things for granted and then all of a sudden by round 2 you realize, oh, I should have clarified that one too. We're talking about teams. When you only have a couple judges, you may not really need to divide them into teams. One of the things you can consider, and sometimes it sort of happens on its own, is giving them a specific responsibility that you want them to keep up throughout the day. Like if I had 200 people, I had Pete and Stefan, who are both relatively experienced, and I know them, I've worked with them a lot, I might say, Stefan, you corral the deck checks at the start of the round, and Pete, you take care of the papery stuff. It's kind of team-ish, but they're only one guy. It's not that they really have anyone to direct. If I've got a couple relatively new judges, I'll keep the tasks in mind. Those are things, but I might switch off who's doing them. Rather, I don't know what the rest of the plans are for the day. What if I need one of them to go out and pick up lunch, and that's the guy who's supposed to be doing paper. So the team concept can be useful, but I wouldn't agonize about it if the staff is small enough. Anything else before the event's starting?
The first thing that I do anytime I walk into a venue is I count the chairs. make sure that I actually have seating for the amount of people that I'm supposed to have, and figure out, while I do that, I figure out how they're set up. If they're set up in rows of, say, 9 matches, where I have an odd number of matches in a length, well, that doesn't work the way we have table tents. So either a match needs to be added or taken away. And so that's just a habit I've gotten into. First thing I do is check those numbers and you check the setup, because once players show up, that gets a lot harder.
You need to figure out what your head judge announcement is going to be. I know my first event, I didn't put any thought into it, so I just ended up opening up the Magic Judge app and reading off of it. And I didn't have a good pun, so it was completely terrible.
That is a really good idea. Part of the responsibility as head judge of an event, you're the face of the event. You're the guy making the announcements. You're the guy that appeals go to. If players have any comments, complaints, anything like that, they want to talk about that other judge and that other moral ruling he made, you're the one they're going to come up and talk to. You're the face of the DCI. A competitive event where you're going with the IPG, probably want to take a look at that before the event. Preferably a little earlier than just the night before. But do look at it again that morning, or if there's quiet times of the day, you want to refresh, what are those lapsing triggers again? That's fine to do. Bring that up into your mind, but make sure you're prepared going into that as well. Talk to your scorekeeper, get to know your scorekeeper. If you're doing the scorekeeping, hi, Self, how are you doing today? Be aware of some things with scorekeeping, because the bigger a tournament, the longer time it takes for those result flips to get entered. At 200 people, it's not anywhere near like 2,000 people, but the general rule of thumb I like to have is keep your scorekeeper happy. The event needs that scorekeeper to keep things moving. If you want to keep an event running on time, which is probably one of the expectations you tournament organizers are going to have, you're going to run this 200-person event. They don't want it to take 14 hours to slog through all of that. Even if people are playing really annoying decks, it shouldn't take that long to get them all through it. Over than others. Most places I've been in, the tournament organizer of the stores found the thermostat and then cranked it as cold as it gets. So when you come there for the morning with your judges, we've got our sweaters on and it's freezing. However, no matter how much air conditioning you have, if you have a room this size and you put 200 people in it, it's going to get warm. But that's always a good thing. If you come in and it feels pleasantly warm when there's no people in the room, definitely talk with the store owner or whoever has got part of the building. Can we turn the thermostat down? Can we open doors and windows and get a cross breeze going through? A nice January, Wisconsin cross breeze. I know at Misty Mountain, we've done things where we'll set up 3 matches per 8-foot table, and we get a gazillion more people than we're expecting, and we have to cram 4 matches instead of 3 to an 8-foot table. Because if you get way more than your normal capacity is, on the flip side, if we're expecting a lot and set up for a lot, and nowhere near that many shows up, we stretch everyone back out. It may be, there's another reason why you have a couple judges working with you. If you have a couple judges, you can say, okay guys, here's the plan. We've got 120 matches set out there, let's make it 80 instead, spread everything out, go. You had your hand up?
Yeah, and it's also one thing that, it might not be in your control that, when the event starts, you got all these people, you got to cram people into 8 people at this table, but by a few rounds into the tournament, once people start dropping, you might gain the ability to spread people back out and get them that space, even though it wasn't an option earlier.
Yeah. You're talking player registration at the start of the day. You've got your scorekeeper at a computer on the side of the room, and a mob of 200 players shows up. What can you do to make this go smoothly? What are little things that you can do that might help? Make a queue. Have an organized line for these players so it's not just a crowd. Ben?
Constant announcements about having your money out. Try and pass out DCI cards to the line ahead of time. Put your match result or your tournament entry slips at the beginning of the line, at the end of the line, stuff like that.
And so that is all very logistical things. You want to get people, when people are actually registering, you want to have their slip with their DCI number or their DCI card out so they can punch it in and their cash in hand right there, not digging it out. Absolutely, that might be one of your use of having a couple judges there. Once you get the table numbers out, if you're otherwise ready to go, you might send one of them out to make the announcements up and down the line and have somebody else standing next to the scorekeeper to handle cash and make sure that the numbers on the slip are legible and appear to be actual digits. Any other ideas for registration?
So I see this specifically at smaller stores. Sometimes the proximity from the scorekeeper to where the sheets are coming in is not very close. So sometimes they get stacks and then they'll take a stack over the scorekeeper. And it's usually better to have the scorekeeper be at that front of the line right away. So they're either getting it from the player directly, they're putting it into a keypad, or you have some efficient process to get that information into the computer as fast as possible.
Yeah, you never know exactly until you get there, until you talk. You don't know what the situation is with that store, their scorekeeper, their setup. So listen to these and keep these in mind. Think, how can I get this, work in this system and keep it moving?
Even during registration, effective communication with players is key, because people will sit down and start writing up their deck list when they haven't got their slip in, and having judges go around telling players, oh, hey, you can get your deck list in later, get that turned into us right now because we really need it. Can help you get those slips in earlier so your scorekeeper can get them in faster and keep it from getting bogged down right at the last minute with a flurry of slips.
That's a really good one, because if I'm sure everyone's got a group of players who tend to come in like 5 minutes before registration is about to close. So if you can get as many in before that, it makes that last crunch easier. Okay. So for dealing and counting with deck lists, if you're doing deck lists at this event, and you may not be doing these at like F&M and stuff like that, but players are turning in deck lists, or you're collecting deck lists at some point. Where might be a good point to collect deck lists?
Player meeting.
Yeah, that I think is pretty much universal now, that you have a player meeting. And you're running with Word, unless it's changed since I was last using it. When you do a seat all players, it seats them alphabetically by first name.
Yep.
So you might as well just seat them for round one. If you have 200 people and you have to alphabetize deck lists, or at least put them in letter order, it's really not going to take you that long. And if you don't have to have them getting up and getting down multiple times, that saves you some more time too. The seating by, alphabetically by last name that they do at GPs, that's something that they do a lot because it is such a huge event and it does save time there. 200 people, doesn't take very long. As a kind of working rule, when I've been counting, looking at decks, how long does it take to verify 60-15 and card legality and not 4-ups? Really, really rough estimate, a minute per list. 50-minute round, you got 3 judges, you and your 2 judges. You can probably comfortably get 150 or a little more. There's some give and take with that, because some are faster than others. The guy who's playing all goblins is really quick. The guy who's playing all the green and black cards that I own because they're cool might take a little longer. Most of them will go a little faster, but you're always going to have something that you need to double count. You get distracted in the middle. What number was I at? What are things you can do? If you have 200 players and you're trying to get these all done in round 1, and your rough estimate is you can maybe get these done, maybe get 150 done at a time. What are some things that you might consider to help this chug along?
Calculators. So good for that.
Calculators. If you've got any kind of counting system of your own, or the DCI Judge app that's got the little 1, 2, 3, 4 calculators, that can help the counting part of it.
Yeah, I was taught to, if I ever came across one that had bad numbers, just to pass to the other judge that was also counting, so that's a fresh set of eyes, and keep going on the ones that you have, just so that you have double verification.
Yeah, anytime you have a deck list where you determine it's got the 59 cards or something, have someone else double check it, because, if you count wrong once, the first time you're perfectly capable of counting wrong
For
again.
the first half of the round, the scorekeeper can usually help count the deck lists.
The scorekeeper can help. If they aren't familiar with the cards, they can at least count 60-15. That's an important resource to remember with that too.
If you really are not going to finish in time, the first thing to throw overboard is checking for legality, because the opponent will spot illegal cards sooner or later. They won't be able to count 60-15 and so forth, but they'll be able to, when somebody drops a black notice in the standard tournament.
That's a really good point there. Alan?
So I know that when we've had crowds at the store, we'll usually have 4 or 5 people working in the store, and I'm throwing this out for opinions, but I know that I've grabbed store employees who obviously have some background with Magic to sit. They're not playing the tournament, but to help with deck lists, because in that first round, when everybody goes to sit down, the store gets dead. These 4 or 5 employees who, we've beefed up the employees for the day because of the PTQ, they're all standing around.
Absolutely. For like hanging pairings, people are talking about finding a good place to hang pairings. This is a room with a lot of nice, flat, lovely wall space. Where would be a better place, and where would be worse places to hang pairings on the walls in this room?
Corners. Don't hang them in the corner.
Spoken from, it sounds like somebody who's had experience having done that, and why is that?
Because they all jam into the corner and cannot get out.
Yes.
I like up by the door as just going out, because a lot of players will go outside, get a breath of air, have a smoke, something like that.
That's a really good
Everybody
idea.
goes outside and everybody can come back in.
That's a really good idea. I haven't called on you recently.
I like posts.
Posts?
I was gonna say the same thing, right there, you can get at it and you can get out fast.
But I was gonna add also, but part of the logistics for pairings is know the rules of, is there in a facility that's not the store, know the rules for things like tape on the walls. Some places that are rentals will say you cannot tape on the walls at all.
Yes.
Painter's tape is wonderful for
Yes,
that.
it is. Beware of bottlenecks. One of the stores I work with has a big divider through some of its space, and while that's a very convenient place to hang postings for a 20-man tournament, for 64 it did not work. And I'm like, no, that wall, that down there, far apart.
You might need to experiment to find exactly the right place. Karsten?
And just as important as where you put your pairings and how many spots you have for pairings
Yes.
and postings.
How many?
Number of players divided by 50 is a good estimate that I've heard.
Sure, if at our 200-person event, we probably want at least 3 copies of pairings going out to different places of people. A lot of it will be determined by the space that you copy.
Not by the judge's station or the scorekeeper.
That falls into the category of keep the scorekeeper happy, and not having everybody come by the scorekeeper will help keep the scorekeeper happy. Kevin?
If your space is completely full, it might be logistically better to have everyone go outside if it's a nice day, and then post pairings at the door so they can come in and find their seat immediately.
We did that once in Wisconsin, a beautiful day like this. Our store was absolutely jam-crammed full. We put the pairings outside, and it gave the judges 30 seconds to do a sweep for trash as all the players went out and got a breath of fresh air and figured out where they were sitting. End of round. And if you've ever done like strategy games, a GP, something like that, they have a very specific organized end of round procedure. You don't need to be that organized at a 100, 200 person event. But as head judge, you probably do want to swing through near the end of the round to get a sense of how many matches are out and where are they. And get your judges on them. Coordinate with your scorekeeper when you get down to like the last few of them, especially after time is called. When it's, again, you're the keeper of the time. I like when it's about, if they don't have a time extension, when it gets to be about 5 minutes beyond the end of the round, I, as head judge, like to go personally to all those tables and ask, what turn are you in? It's a way to make sure that they heard time was called and find out where they are, because if they're still in turn 1, and this isn't a legacy event or something, they might need to pick up their pace a little bit and keep moving. Because they're slowing the whole event down. This doesn't mean you run over there and, oh my gosh, 5 minutes, slow play warning. No, you might need to take over from your other judges to watch for that. But be aggressive about those last matches, because that's the only way too. That's the fastest way you're gonna find the slips that have gotten stuck in someone's pocket. If your scorekeeper says, I'm missing 3 slips, and you know that there's 2 matches out there, and you can tell them which ones, then there's a slip that, you know, we do a double check for, the scorekeeper does a double check for, and then you might need to announce to the players to find out, oh, yeah, it's right here. You do need to deal with appeals if you have any. And that's the general procedure for that, is have your judge explain what the situation was. If it's really simple and basic, you can go to the table and say, here's what I understand happened, blah, 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 is this correct? Yes, yes, okay, and here's what I'm doing. If it's a big convoluted mess, then you get up to the table and you may need to listen to one player first and then the other player and sort it all out. So, once you get rolling in an event, what are the ongoing tasks that happen that need to be done as an event is running? Pairings and match result slips.
Deck checks.
Deck checks.
Floor coverage.
Floor coverage.
Keep play spaces clean.
Keeping the place clean. Absolutely.
Keeping your judges' food, drink, breaks.
Yes.
Making sure no table numbers go AWOL.
Getting the table numbers out there in the first place so that you can guard them from going AWOL.
Side events.
Side events, if you're going to have them, yeah.
If you have limited events, if it's a limited event or there's limited events, side events, you need to make sure that there are lands.
Lands, that kind of goes along with your planning ahead for the tournament organizer. You'd rather not get there in the morning and say, do we have any lands? Very good.
Doing what you can to make sure people's belongings aren't stolen.
Yep, making sure that people have their stuff. Other things that I have on here, you're going to have, if you're doing deck lists at this event, you may have problem deck lists. Those are going to need to be dealt with. Your scorekeeper needs to be entering results timely and getting players registered. Somebody needs to be keeping track of the time for the event. Round clocks don't just start themselves. If you're doing a store event, they may not have an official round clock. It may be your phone or your watch. As it gets towards the end of the tournament, if there's a top 8 involved, you're going to need to think ahead a little bit. Where are you going to hold the top 8? How are you going to handle that? When it gets close to the end, spend a little time if there are prizes to be distributed. How are you going to be dealing with those? As head judge, you kind of always want to be thinking like about a round ahead. What's going to be coming up next? That's one of the biggest differences. It's between just being a judge and being the head judge. And it sort of parallels some of the difference that I see from level 1 judges and judges who move up to level 2. When you're a floor judge, especially your level 1 floor judge, you show up, you do your judging, you figure out what the judge tasks are, you might have to be told to do a couple things, and off you go. When you're the head judge, you need to kind of step back a little bit and take a look at the event as a whole. Where are things being done or not being done? Where are there holes? Where do things need to be filled in? I also see that with judges as they move up towards level 2. They also start thinking a little more in terms of what can I do to make this whole event keep running smoothly, as opposed to what do I need to do right now. So that's kind of what, start thinking in terms of that, in terms of your mindset for being head judge. And a lot of this is timeliness. How can you make each of these tasks go as quickly as possible?